Now, the time has come once again for Australians to prepare for the tax season. Most Australians residents are legally required to submit an income tax return or notify the Australian Taxation Office if that is unnecessary. But for many, according to new research, this is one of the most stressful times of the year. It's not hard to imagine, is it? Joining me now is Intuit, Australia's accountant and advisor lead, Damien Greathead. Damien, good morning.
Good morning, Tim.
It's not a great surprise that it's a stressful time for many people.
No, absolutely. We got out and we surveyed more than 1,000 Australians across the country, and more than 30% say it's the most stressful time for them. So not a big surprise, but I think there are things that we can be doing to help alleviate some of that anxiety.
Absolutely. Now, what are the main findings of the research?
So first and foremost, very stressful time of the year for a big bunch of the population. I think the other interesting piece of the findings were that humour is a really important way in which we deal with the anxiety that comes at tax time. And I think the last piece of the findings, which I thought was really interesting, 60% of the respondents, they think small business needs more help getting through the end of financial year and subsequent tax filing period.
Now, the tax department, when they send correspondence, they still have the provisions at the end, you know, if you're still struggling from COVID. So there is that there for those that are still struggling. But when you compare it to the height of the pandemic, it's a different tax department now, isn't it? When we had JobKeeper and everything else, they were very, very lenient. But things have tightened, protocols gone back.
I would agree, Tim. I think the COVID period where there was a bit of leniency, where things were relaxed and much more support, that started to subside. And yes, the tax agency certainly going back to where they were in 2019. So they certainly are investigating. They're looking a little bit more closely at those filings. And I think that is one of the causes of stress. The tax code is incredibly complicated. I am not a tax expert. I'm not a tax advisor. And that's why it's really important to sort of lean on those experts in the industry. I think if you look at small business, they're experts at baking, they're expert mechanics, expert engineers. And so I think that's the big learning from this study is lean on those people that are experts on the tax code and have them help you understand how to make it as less stressful as possible.
Absolutely. Now, 32% of Australians, that means around a third of the audience watching this program nationally today and across in New Zealand, but I'm only speaking specifically about Australians here in this survey. They find it difficult to complete their tax return. What are the main challenges?
I think there are a couple of things there, Tim. First and foremost, and I alluded to a bit earlier, the tax code is incredibly complicated. It's written in a way that you and I, as lay people, don't necessarily understand it. I go to the ATO website and I struggle to understand what certain rulings or what it means for me. And so I think that lack of understanding of the tax code, lack of understanding of the tax planning and tax filing process. And then I think the third piece, which I thought was interesting, was people leave it to the last minute. People procrastinate. People are...
It's like the HSC exam, right?
Exactly. And disorganisation, that leads to raising of those anxiety levels. So I think those are a couple of key things. The knowledge, but then also the organisation and the procrastination.
You mentioned something very early on about laughter. People prefer... So does this mean when they're going to do their tax return, they push it to one side and go and watch Ricky Gervais?
I know. They certainly TikTok and Instagram Reels might be coming in at this time of year, but what we did find is that it's a great anxiety relief, and we saw that in some of the responses of the survey. So people would prefer to get out and pick up after their pooch. So they'd prefer to pick up the dog poop rather than finishing off that tax return. They'd prefer to sit in the dentist chair and get that filling rather than complete that tax return. And one for me was also, as a taller person, sitting in the middle seat of an economy long-haul flight. So looking at the responses from the survey, it is clear that Australians still have that great sense of humour when it comes to tax time. And I think recognise as well that that's a great way to help alleviate some of that anxiety this time of year.
Absolutely. Now, finally, what are the main tips? We've only got a certain amount of time on an interview like this, but what are some of those essential tips for ordinary people to make tax time a little less stressful?
So first things first, get some good advice. Ask your mates, not for tax advice, but for a good accountant, for a good BAS agent. So that's certainly one thing that you can do, and they'll help you understand the tax code and what it means for your specific situation. And then the other one is get organised. There are a bunch of apps out there that can help you get organised. So rather than putting those receipts and bills into a shoebox or a glove box, snap a picture of them, get them into the accounting software, and let the technology do the heavy lifting. So when you're meeting with your accountant, your client, your accountant has all the information that they need at their fingertips, or if you're doing your own tax return, you've got all the information at your fingertips as well. So get yourself organised and let the technology do the heavy lifting.
Do you do your own tax? Yeah.
Interestingly, last year was the first year that we got a tax advisor. Our situation changed. Had a baby, bought a house, so that was we realised that we need some better advice. So we went out and got the help of a tax advisor. And actually, 30% of the respondents that said tax season wasn't a stressor for them, all of them said that they sought tax advice from the experts.
I think it is a very, very good advice. Good to see you, Damien. Have a nice weekend.
You too, Tim. Thank you.